My dogs decided they wanted to participate in the meeting. They whined at the door. For those who've just joined, we're giving it until 6:35, just to give everyone an opportunity to join the meeting. Will, can I have screen sharing, please?
Yes. You want now or do you want it?
Yeah, I might
Uh,
as well take it now.
okay. All right. You should be able to now.
Great, thank you.
Do you want me to give the rules of the road for everybody before we start going in a
Sure.
minute? I think most people are familiar with how we run our meetings, but just in case you're not, you'll notice that right now everyone is muted. And as we go through the meeting, everyone's going to stay muted except for our co-chairs, Adam and Elizabeth, and anybody who they call on. So you can participate by going to the React icon on your device, press the raise hand button there. It's not the wave or the thumbs up, those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute, and then just be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting. If you have any questions about Zoom software, you can chat me. I'm here for support. Otherwise, the chat is only for technical support. It won't be for asking questions of Adam or Elizabeth, as they will never see those chats. So with that, hand it back over. It's 6:35, and I think we should get started.
Great. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is, I didn't change the date on the cover page, my bad. But here we are. This is our agenda for this evening. Okay, Adam, I'm turning this over to you for now.
So we have two items on the agenda. The first one is looking ahead. So we wanted to just set the schedule for some of the upcoming blocks we will be reviewing in the committee. And we also, the main thrust of today's meeting is to discuss block 1435, which is a little bit of a complex block, split by bridge access, but something we will get to. So next slide. So again, as a recap, where we are is we are addressing the highlighted block 1435, which is East 60th to East 61st Street. As we have crossed off in the M14 district, sorry, working from the top, Friedland and Chapman have pursued their own individual rezoning. We will be discussing East 90th Street, East 74th and East 73rd Streets in the M14. We have discussed other blocks, block 1456, which was last meeting, and 1474, which was the the small block. And tonight we'll be discussing block 1435. Again, what is permitted in the districts we are aiming to rezone in M14 and C84, they're generally heavier commercial uses, office uses are permitted, life science uses are permitted, schools, dreaded self-storage uses, manufacturing, warehouses, auto body, parking garage, and hotels by special permit. The key and the reason we are doing this is that residential uses are not permitted in the M14 and the C84. And in the task force for residential rezoning, we are seeking to rezone these areas for residential development. Next slide. Again, a review of the hypotheses that we've put forth to understand why we need this rezoning and some of the ways we're going to get there. So our hypothesis was that the FAR is equal to or greater than 6.5 FAR. That is the FAR associated with the community facility development of the M14 and the C84 zoning districts. So if nothing changes, all of those sites mapped in the M14 and the C84 zoning districts can be developed to a 6.5 FAR. And the key with that is that there is no height under those zoning districts. There's an effective height, but there's no stated height limit. The next one is we want to make sure the FAR for all lots meets the MIH requirements. So as a recap, MIH promulgates that if you are under 12,500 square feet of residential zoning floor area, you do not have to comply with mandatory inclusionary housing. If you are between 12,500 and 25,000 square feet of residential FAR, you can opt out through a payment, and the payment is set pursuant to whatever community board you are in. Above 25,000 square feet, you have to comply with mandatory inclusionary housing. So our goal here is to make sure that those sites and potentially those assemblages that are formed subsequent to this rezoning are large enough, or that the zoning is dense enough that all sites will comply with mandatory inclusionary housing. Sorry, the next bullet point is the minimum FAR needed to ensure that almost all lots are meet MIH requirements. So that piggybacks on what we just talked about.
But it's also, just to clarify, it's a little bit of the converse. It's sort of, you don't want to overzone. You know, if you only need an FAR of 8 for all lots to get to minimum MIH, you don't necessarily need to create a zone for 10. So it's sort of a little bit of the counterbalance. The first is make sure the FAR is high enough. And the second is, but you don't necessarily need to go above that.
Right, and that's going to be important for side street zoning as opposed to avenue zoning. Contextual zone, you know, again, with some of the underlying zonings, the M14 and the C84, there is no stated height limit. So the idea is that for certain districts we look into, that we will establish a contextual zone, which will have a stated height limit. The stated height limit is TBD. The next bullet point is the avenue zones should mirror the adjacent opposite block zone types. So, and we talked about this in the previous meeting, is that, you know, there was an argument that, oh, you know, the zoning should only be 210 feet, 240 feet, but then you look around and I got 300 something feet across the street. I got 400 feet across the street. I got 500 feet across the street. Does it make sense to not match some of the context in the neighborhood and create the consistency? And then lastly, we want to encourage paired mixed use districts. So we're going to grandfather some of the existing uses. People who have participated in previous meetings have talked about the need for some sort of quasi-manufacturing use, some sort of auto-related uses. And we're not trying to do away with those uses specifically. We're trying to create a zoning district that can incorporate those existing uses, but also will provide for residential density. So next slide. So we want to discuss, we want to set forth for everyone here and for future meeting participants, for which we hope there will be hundreds, if not thousands. We are going to discuss block 1435 today. And in July, we're going to discuss the East 70s. So that's an M14 block. And in September, we're going to discuss the East 90s, which is a C84. In October, also in the East 90s, the C84. And in November and December, we're going to have summary and feedback, and we'll work with other members of the committee to hopefully craft a resolution to the full board, which will set forth essentially what we're thinking, what we think the district should be for each of the areas. And hopefully between now and then, we will gain lots of membership and lots of opinions so that we can present to the board something that has really been thought out, and that is not just the result of, you know, a few people on Zoom, but is really the result of a lot of input from a lot of stakeholders. So did you want to take this, Elizabeth, or do you want?
All right, why don't we tag team a bit on this? So this is a map, a zone lot map of block 1435. And just to orient everybody, let's see, down here, this is First Avenue. And what you can see is that this is many small, relatively narrow lots along First Avenue. Then this is East 61st Street. On the south side, this block is bisected by the off-ramp from the Ed Koch Bridge. I can't stop saying Queensboro Bridge. And there are a couple of lots on the west side of the off-ramp, and then there are a number of lots on the east side of the off-ramp. So lots of small lots on this particular block. And between, you know, the adjacency to the bridge and the bifurcation and the number of lots, we felt that this block deserved its own evening because it is a little bit more complicated than some of the others. Let's start with the avenue. So this is basically the frontage along First Avenue. You can see that the structures are all tenement style structures, whether they're being used as residential or other things, a little bit less clear. There's been some talk that some of these are being used as hotels with retail on the ground floor. And here's the context. Directly north, between 61st and 62nd along First Avenue, this block front is zoned for C28, which is an R10 equivalent block. And then directly opposite, this is actually a C47, meaning it allows more commercial uses, which is also an R10 equivalent. And this building is about 400 feet tall. It's 38 or 39 stories, and we looked up the height. It is about 400 feet tall, immediately opposite. And then this is the diagonal view across First Avenue. This is now the east side of First Avenue between 61st and 62nd Street. We discussed this block in particular at our last meeting. And so it's currently a C84. It is part of our study. And in keeping with the context across the street and adjacent and to the north, we previously discussed proposing rezoning this block front to be a C28, which is the same as the block across the street. It is the same residential density as this block immediately to the south with the 39-story building. So this is the section that we are talking about, which are the avenue facing lots. Lots 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. You can see it. This is kind of unusual for our neighborhood to have so many lots on an avenue facing. And so here, if we look at what were our hypotheses, we had a hypothesis that avenue zones should mirror the adjacent and opposite zone types to create consistency. So here we would again propose a C28, which is an R10 equivalent that gets you to a 10 FAR without MIH, but this would all be with MIH. So we would see a 12 FAR. There is not a height limit here, very consistent with the building across the street, which is 400 feet tall. And I will note here that, again, a 10 FAR would make, even if somebody wanted to develop these smaller lots individually, most of them would still fully qualify for MIH, but 3 of the lots are slightly smaller than 2,500 square feet. So theoretically, they could pay into a fund and not supply MIH if they were developed individually. But as soon as you gang at least 2 of them together, you end up in mandatory MIH territory. And I think there is, Adam, I believe you've looked some of this up. I think there is some consistent ownership across some of these lots.
Yes,
is that correct?
there is. Yes, there is. And what's funny is that, piggybacking what you just said, is that currently there is a sliver law, so no one could really develop each of these to the max FAR individually. The city of Yes proposes to eliminate the sliver law, which is an interesting wrinkle. We'll see how that turns out. But yes, there is common ownership. I have to get the exact blocks and lots, but there's, I think, 8 or so, maybe even 10 that are owned collectively. So,
So now let's get to the slightly more complicated part of this, which is the mid-block piece. So first, let's tackle the northern side of the mid-block here. So this consists of a single large lot west of the overpass, and then several smaller lots east of the overpass. And this lot here, number 16, this is a through block lot. This is currently, I think this is an Equinox or one of the major fitness chains. To give you all context, this is what exists west of the Queensboro Bridge exit. So this is that one large lot. It is a commercial building. It's currently 7 stories tall. And I think, Adam, you've got the data on height, but this is not unusually, it's not an unusually sized building for 7 stories.
That's on our block, right? That's 90 feet.
Okay. Then to the east of the off-ramp, so you can see over here at the very edge, this is the off-ramp from the bridge. And you can see it is a series of, one new building, which is I believe it's a medical building. And then a series of tenement style buildings, which I believe today are mostly residential. And this is what you have across the street. Zoning across the street is a combination of R8B and C25. Most of it is R8B compliant in height. There is one building that is technically on the mid-block that is 15 stories tall. I don't know if that was built under a prior zoning or if it added some air rights somehow. But there is one 15-story building immediately across the street to the north. Otherwise, this is mostly R8B compliant. And this is what is opposite that westerly portion. So again, this is R8B and C25. As you get towards 2nd Avenue, which is here, you get greater height, but on the mid-block section, you are mostly in R8B consistent buildings. So when we look at all of these lots, because they are different sized, you end up with a little bit of a mixture of what do you need in terms of FAR in order to achieve mandatory inclusionary housing. That large lot that's already been fairly recently developed, it only needs a 2.2 FAR. So obviously much smaller than anything that we would consider. The next group of lot 39 only would need a 4.7. So again, anything we would consider here would work. But there are these sections of small lots that would need a very high FAR in order to comply or to require MIH if they were to be redeveloped individually. Lot 16 is that through block lot. It's the existing fitness building. So there, it's not so much the FAR that is a challenge.
Well, if I could just comment on one thing, if you just go back to that slide, two back. Lot 16, 33, 37, and 38 are all part of one merged zoning lot right now. Not to say that the zoning lot couldn't be severed and in the future, but as for some reason, I'm not sure exactly why, it's all one zoning lot. There was acquisitions of development rights and it's all one zoning lot. So
okay,
just keep that in mind.
16, 37, 38, did you say?
And 33.
And 33. Okay,
right.
so it's these three buildings. These are all tenement style properties, plus this part of lot 16.
That's right. Well,
So
all of lot 16, it's all one zoning lot, but yes.
Yeah. So in other words, all of this is one zoning lot today.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So here's a case where our decisions or our hypotheses are a little bit in conflict. Some of these lots need a very high FAR to require MIH, and we want to require MIH. On the other hand, we want to minimize the incentive to redevelop existing residential buildings. And the opposite block is R8B. So sort of how do we solve this conundrum? One question is, could you go with a lower FAR but require a minimum lot size for redevelopment? That's kind of a question. I don't know enough to know the answer to that. I think Adam thinks that that is a possibility.
I do.
But in absence of that, or maybe even considering that, I think the balance of the argument really goes towards keep the R8B, an R8A or R8B on this block. Minimize any incentive to redevelop existing residential buildings. And the opposite block is R8B. And so we do want to try to be on the mid-block consistent with the opposite block. So I get to a proposal here of stick with R8B. For this side of the block. Let's do the final piece of the block, and then we'll come back and can talk about each of these in turn. The final piece of the block is the south side of 60th Street. So you're directly overlooking the bridge. And again, you've got a number of small, narrower lots on west of the bridge. Then you've got a small lot here. This is actually fairly recent residential. You've got this large building here, the fitness center, which we'll show you photos of, and then three more smaller lots to the east of that. So here are the pictures. This is now the portion west of the overpass. So here, this is actually not a lot in our study. This is lot 7501. It's a through block lot. The entrance to this very tall building is actually on the 61st Street side. And it's set back on this side. Then you've got the three smaller buildings, existing buildings that appear to at least have once been residential. They may or may not be now. And here you can see the relatively new residential building that's just on the other side of the underpass, the overpass. So again, you've got here all the way over on the left is that new residential building. And then you've got this fairly tall, large fitness club building. That's lot 16. And then to the right of it, you've again got a couple of tenement style buildings before you get to the avenue. This is a block where I think it is worth having a discussion about height. We have been talking about only other than the avenues, contextually zoned blocks, types, which all come with height restrictions. And this is one where, because it is truly on the edge, because there is nothing opposite it on the south side, it's adjacent to the bridge, it is very distant from other buildings further to its south. On its block, there is an existing 39-story building that's not part of our study. I think there's an argument to be made that even though this is technically not on an avenue, that there isn't a real reason to put a height restriction on this block. Particularly since you may want, if you're rebuilding this for greater residential density, you may want to create setbacks away from the bridge, which I don't believe is currently allowed in an R10A. I think there's special considerations on this block given its location. So where we came to was we'd like to see this as if it were an avenue block and zone for an R10. This would be a very typical 10 FAR, 12 with MIH, which would meet MIH requirements on every single lot, including the ones, obviously there are several here that require a 10 FAR. And I think could create a very nice new sort of the southern boundary of the Upper East Side on this block. So that's sort of the presentation that we've done for these lots, this block. It's a complicated block, and we'd now love to get input and feedback and open this up for discussion. Michelle.
Yes, thank you both very much for this. Appreciate it. I imagine we'll go over everything piece by piece, but sticking with what you just presented, the unusual block, this is it. The one that you're proposing should not have a height limit for the reasons you stated?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that if that is the block for the off-ramp of the bridge, that means it has unusual congestion, that there are cars all the time coming over that bridge.
Wait, A, sorry about the dogs, but B, let me stop you there for a second. The cars come off the off-ramp onto 61st Street.
Okay,
This part of the block, we are proposing R8B.
okay,
Where the cars come out, this section, they can turn right here. This part, we are proposing R8B for these lots that would front where the cars come out.
okay. And that includes the lot that is one zoning lot. That includes the buildings that are one part of one zoning lot.
So
16, 35,
Yeah.
33, and 30, that's one zoning lot. Okay, that's
So-
all. Okay,
Okay, the part that we're proposing not have a height limit would be the south side of this block, which is the north side of 60th Street. So it's the portion that is fronting 60th Street, where there is currently very little traffic because there's kind of nowhere to go. And it does not receive cars that are coming off of the bridge.
okay, all right, thanks for that clarification.
Right. So
Tell me again your
assume
rationale.
if this area wanted to rebuild, and frankly, 16 is already fairly developed. This could be a case where they could put additional height on this side, but not on this side.
So what's the height of 16 now? How many feet?
So they say it's only 5 stories, but it's actually 146 feet.
Yeah, well,
tall.
that's why we have to start talking about feet, because what we used to consider, 10 stories, 10 feet per story, is no longer the standard. So that's why
Right,
we
well,
have
this
to
is-
talk
this is a
about feet. So
unique-
this is 100 feet, you say?
It's 146 feet tall.
146.
That's according to the certificate of occupancy. This
Okay.
is a unique improvement. So, but yes.
Okay, so that's 146 feet. And you are proposing that the rest of that block, let me understand, not have a height limit, correct?
Correct. That it just be an R10 zone similar to, let's find a good photo for you. Oh no, there it is. So this building here on the right, this is the kind of building that you might get in an R10 without a height limit.
Okay, I think I've stated it a few meetings back. I am not a fan, there'll be exceptions maybe, but I'm not a fan of our rezoning with no height limits. Because that is still a side street with no height limit. It could get the 400-foot building that you pointed to, and potentially a whole line of those on a narrow street. I think really has a negative input on light and air. I don't see the purpose of it. So in general, I'm not comfortable with no height limits, no matter where you're putting them, as a matter of fact, but especially on a street like this.
So I'm just gonna push back on one thing that you said, Michelle, and counter. It's kind of hard to call this a narrow street, because what you really have here is wider to the next building, is wider than any of our wide streets. Because what you have here is multiple lanes of the bridge. So that is why we have thought of this as being much more like a wide street or an avenue than like a typical narrow street.
Do you have a picture of that by chance?
Looking south over the bridge,
Yeah,
if I don't have it in the presentation, I would have to search for it, and I'm not
okay.
sure.
All right.
I have it pulled up on Google Maps right now if you want me
Yeah.
to show it.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yes, please. I will stop sharing.
Sure. Because I was interested too.
Yeah, I know that.
So here, you should be able to see this, I hope. So
It's-
these are the three buildings that you were talking about, right?
Yeah,
And so if you look this way, you see the tram and the bridge, and then all the way across the bridge is 59th Street. So it is a pretty sizable gap.
So it's 60 feet, then 200 feet, then 60 feet between the frontage of that block and the next block to the south. So 320 feet total.
Here's a better vantage point though. So these are the buildings you were talking about.
Right.
yep.
There's the Equinox, there's the affordable housing building that was
Mhm.
built a
That's
few
right.
years ago.
Right.
And then here's the bridge. There's a
Which
side
is
street here that
200 feet. The bridge so
mirrors
60
that side
feet,
street we
then
just saw.
200, then 60. Yep.
This is literally the border or the edge of the Upper East Side.
Was that helpful?
That's
Very helpful, very helpful. So as I'm looking at it, I'm envisioning it with no height limits and what could conceivably be built there. I'm not totally comfortable with that. So I'll stop for now. We'll hear what others have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Judy.
Yeah, just a little background. Will just mentioned it. That curved little building under the bridge is senior housing, which was a great asset to the community. And earlier, Elizabeth, you referred to a tall building across the street on the other side that was tall. That's also a senior housing building that we have there. Now, that tall building that you show us on the other side of First Avenue, that was initially part of the Glick site. None of you were old enough to remember what I'm talking about, but across that one, no, not that one, the corner building, that one.
This
Okay,
one.
yeah, that whole block and a piece across the street, Glick was going to put up 2 hotels and movie theaters and all kinds of stuff. And he got the zoning changed for this real tall height building. And then he went broke. And then the city decided they could sell off the various pieces of the entire Glick site on this side and across the street. But the people who bought them would have to give back money and either fix the parks or, give back to the city. Practically all the buildings have been sold, part of the Glick site. And we've gotten most all of our give backs except for one little building going up 60th Street. The other thing I wanted to say is if you go back to the map, yeah, that corner lot, 23, 24, 25, up to 26, going up to 22, 21, and 20. That corner is a hotel. It's been serving as an illegal hotel for years. And actually, maybe 25 years ago, that they were going to have special housing there with one of, I can't think of the name of the charitable institution for special people who had problems, and they were going to have help in the building and everything. But the owners had to go to the state and had to comply with all the state requirements for them to go into that building and make it useful for people who needed it with their services. And they refused to meet up, the owners refused to meet up with the state law. So that corner is kind of, they've got a scaffolding up now. I don't know what they're doing with those stores. They're, yeah, that green building. Yeah, there's the scaffolding. I mean, they haven't been the best neighbors. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so I don't know how changing the zoning would affect them. And if they think that they could sell their building and build a really big building on the corner there, going up the street and along the avenue, I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. This is just my personal opinion, giving you what I know from having had some experience with them over the years.
That's
And I think the position of the task force is that would be a good thing.
Well,
right.
yes.
I mean, getting a residential building that with more units and replacing an illegal hotel, that seems like a good thing.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know that it's an illegal hotel. I remember seeing that some of the building classifications were associated with a hotel use. So I wouldn't want to call them out as operating.
well, I don't know. We've had some problems with them.
Okay.
We've had murders there. You don't want me to go into it. Okay. It's got a long history. But
the historian of the East 60s.
It would be okay if, as you said, it had mandatory inclusion housing, then it would be a good thing.
Yeah.
I think.
Craig?
Hi, everyone. I just want to make sure everyone was clear in terms of how the traffic patterns are there. So most of the traffic coming off the bridge actually is not going to hit 61st Street. The upper roadway exits onto 62nd Street. There's only one lane of traffic that comes off the bridge, and I believe that it's a bus only access on 60th Street. So you have to go to 61st Street for that single lane that comes out of there. But otherwise, the upper roadway filters out to 62nd Street. Just want to make sure that that context was clear. And then just in terms of that corner lot, I think, Elizabeth, I think you have a lot of put a lot of thought into that. And I think what you're suggesting makes sense. I think that is probably a place where we can definitely see some potential opportunities to build, and height limits would only restrict our ability to actually accomplish what we're aiming to over here at that location in particular.
Thank you, Craig. Judy, you had wanted to add?
Yes, along with Craig, 9, I can't see, it's off my screen. 9 going up. Can you
6,
move?
7, 8, 9?
Yeah. There's a very active bus stop there, and a lot of people waiting along that block.
It's the Q59 bus.
I don't remember the numbers. They go to Queens, they go to.
Yeah, there's a Queens bus that then comes across and down.
A bus that goes to the prison that comes there. That's a very active bus route. A lot of people waiting on the sidewalk, particularly up near 2nd Avenue, to catch buses. That from that part of the mid block going up towards 2nd, very, very active streetwise. And we have a very active bar as one of the residents occupants in 7 or 8, I'm not sure, or 6 and 7. So that half of the block is a very, very busy block. pedestrian wise.
Michelle?
Thank you. I'll just say that I'm a great fan of R10A. And I think that because that has a maximum 210 height limit with a 20% bonus for inclusionary housing. So you can get a 240, 250 foot building. And to me, that would make more sense here than zoning with no height limit. I think that could give us what we want, and yet it be a reasonable and controllable, based on occupancy in those buildings, and for the streetscape to be able to handle that. I'm a great fan of R10A. And I would certainly like to see something like that as opposed to no height limits, my opinion.
So let me now just sort of ask a broad question of the group. We sort of proposed 3 different sections here. We proposed along the avenue a R10 equivalent or consistent with other avenue blocks without a height limit. We proposed on this side, the 61st Street side, we proposed R8B, which is height limited, and would probably limit redevelopment of most of these, if not all of these lots. And on this side, we are proposing an R10 equivalent with or without height restrictions, but R10 along this entire side of 60th Street. Leaving aside the with or without a height limit here, are we all in agreement on those 3 basic building blocks?
But isn't the height limit the issue?
Well, if other than height limit, I haven't heard anybody express that R10 is not appropriate, or a 10 FAR is not appropriate here. Am I hearing that accurately?
Well, let me just speak for myself here.
Yeah.
I would not only like to see the R10A on this block, for reasons that you stated, because it is wider and et cetera, but I would also like to see R10A on the avenue. And because that very tall building of 400 feet is there, I don't think we could look to that as a reason to have equivalent height buildings. Because if you're going to support no height limit, your next building could be 700 feet. And then the one after that can be 900 feet. And then do we then say, which is the context? Now, did it wipe out the context of the 400-foot building? I mean, I think at some point, you, to my mind, and actually the community board has supported a resolution for an R10, well, for height limits on York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenues. They proposed it in the form of special districts. So, however, they did propose a height limit. Now, if we're talking about that resolution, we have to take that into consideration here so as not to be conflicted with it, or we can talk about it and support it, but suggest an R10A, which in effect gives you the R10, which gives you the 210-foot height limit that the board supported. But because we want inclusionary affordable housing, we would support R10A, which would give you the 20% bonus. So that's sort of where I'm coming from when I talk about these streets and height limits. If that's clear, if I've expressed myself clearly.
It seems to me, and as someone who is admittedly not a fan of height limits, that height limits may be appropriate in some of the areas we are discussing. I don't know that a height limit is appropriate amidst all this roadway infrastructure, where the goal is to create potentially a commercial base and then setting the residential up higher off of the roadway. And it's difficult to do that in a 210-foot building. It's easier to do it in a 400 or 500-foot building, where you can set the residents up off of the roadway infrastructure. So while I think that height limits could be discussed in some areas, I don't know that along East 60th Street if it's necessary. And in fact, I would argue that it's probably, this is the best place to have a non-contextual high density development.
All right, I just want to say, I get your point, that when you're talking about no height limits, you can't even say that you think a 400-foot building would work there, because residents would be set up and there's more commercial on the ground floor, because 400 feet has now become the sort of the base height that's being proposed for new construction. So you're going way upwards of 400 feet. And I just think that you're getting that, for me, it's just too dense. And of course, the only savior will be affordable and inclusionary housing, because basically the 400 and 500 and 600-foot buildings that have already been built along the avenues on the Upper East Side are very low density buildings. And they have, 2 or 3 apartments on a floor. That is not our aim. So we are trying to get mandatory inclusionary housing. And to me, to get it, I don't want to see it 600. You're talking about 400 because you think that's what will be built, but you have no way of knowing that 700, 800, 900 feet won't be built, like on 57th Street off Sutton Place. There was a big uproar about that. So to me, it's very, very risky business having no constraints, zero height limits. You're not proposing a height limit of 400. You're proposing no height limit. That to me is of great concern.
There is currently no height limit under the current zone.
I know that, but we're now talking about rezoning.
Someone could decide to take all the parcels that they owned on this block, assemble them, and build a massive self-storage, life science building like that.
Yes.
And so,
well, that's why we're trying to convert them to residential.
right.
But so I understand that, but I don't think the choice is either or.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Craig.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond a little. And Adam, I think I very much agree with your sentiments there. But my only comment, I guess, is I thought, as we're looking forward to the likelihood of City of Yes being approved, that height limits are going to be quite different from what they are now, and that we are talking about not anything close to 210 necessarily in these zoning districts.
Well,
I'm trying to remember.
Let's say height limits will
R10
change, but a contextual zoning district is still a contextual zoning district.
Yeah.
Okay.
So R10A, I think it goes up to like 235 or maybe 255. It's still constrained.
All right. I couldn't remember what it said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right, so I'm going to go back to, and I think if there is a way that maybe we can just do show of hands, because we are a small group. I just, again, want to go try to get some clarity on where do we have consensus, and where do we not have consensus? Do we have consensus that a 10 FAR, 12 with mandatory inclusionary housing is appropriate on the avenue? Is that a generally thumbs up? I'm seeing a generally thumbs up. Okay. Do we have consensus that on the East 60th Street side, which is the side fronting onto the bridge, that a 10 FAR, 12 FAR with MIH is the appropriate FAR? Okay, I'm not seeing any no's. I'm seeing, okay, yes, I'm seeing yeses. Good. On the 61st Street side, which is the north side of this, or the south side of 61st Street, where we have discussed an R8B, which has a much lower FAR. Are we in agreement? Is there consensus that this should be an R8B zoned area? All right, Adam doesn't love it.
I don't love it only because we already have a 90-foot tall building there and a 146-foot tall building there. So.
To be fair, the 146-foot is only that tall on this side. It's not that tall on this side. But yes,
No, I
we
think
have
it is.
we have a 90-foot building here. R8B under City of Yes actually gets pretty close to that.
It's 105.
Yeah. And here we have, roughly 60-foot tall buildings here at the moment. Are we shooting too low here?
You
I'm
have
not getting a lot of
two hands
feedback
up.
here.
Hi. I think with respect to having R8B on the north side of the street, I don't think it's shooting too low. And someone who's on the backside of the East 94th Street rezoning, I wish that was a case that anyone took into consideration, like the context of the smaller buildings on the other side of the street. So I don't think it's unusual to keep R8B on the north side of, I think it's 61st, and then have 60th be zoned as R10. Just because 61st is a smaller side street. I think just because there are two buildings that are taller, that doesn't make context. So that's just my 2 cents about that. I think it's already lenient that 60th would be R10, and I think it's great because it's just next to the bridge, so why not make it higher and bigger? But I think on a side street where there are people living on the other side of that small street, it should stay as a smaller, less dense, and a little bit shorter.
Thank you, Sasha. Michelle?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, the R8B is 75-foot height limit, correct?
It's 75 now. Under City of Yes, it could be up to 105.
Okay, well, that's the City of Yes. That's a whole other thing that we're going to have to talk about in another in other meetings. But I'm for the R8B on the 61st Street side. I couldn't see the thumbs in my screen because we didn't do it as a full screen. I couldn't see who was, how many were for or against the other. So I couldn't see how many were for R10 on both the Avenue and 60th. But so I think if you want to take a little poll in the participants menu, and have everybody just put a thumbs up or a thumbs down, I think you'll get a better sense of it. At least I couldn't see it all. I don't know what you were able to see.
Let's do that. I'm gonna stop sharing this for a minute. So Will, can you
Yeah.
give instructions? Let me just give the first poll will be Avenue fronting, 10 FAR, 12 MIH. Leave aside height limit or no height limit, just the FAR, Avenue fronting. Does everybody?
And
Green
you
button.
may, I would say actually go ahead and put the map back up because I think it's helpful for everybody as you're
Sure.
drawing over where it is.
Yeah, I was just trying to see where,
Yeah.
how
And then I would
people
say
will impact.
everyone else go to your React icon and you're going to press that button. It's going to open a menu. That menu is going to have a bunch of different options for you. There's a green check mark that means yes and a red X that means no. So Elizabeth, just reframe your question. And then if you're in the yes side of it, click the green check mark. And if you're in the no side of it, click the red X.
Okay. A green check means that you agree that a 10 FAR, 12 with mandatory inclusionary housing is appropriate on the avenue. The area I am.
Then Elizabeth, I assume you're a yes with that since you're
I'm a yes
suggesting
with
it. So you have 1 no and 4 yeses, and others have not weighed in yet. 2 no's now and 5 yeses. And that is only the board members. So 5-2.
Okay.
So I'm going to clear the feedback so nobody has to do anything.
Yep.
And now for
Now,
follow-up.
yes means that you think a 10 FAR, 12 with MIH is appropriate on the East 60th Street facing lots.
It is the same vote.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask it a slightly different way. Yes, if you think an R10A zone, which is 10 FAR, 12 MIH, and has a height limit, is appropriate for the avenue facing lots. So the specific question is R10A for the avenue facing lots.
And so that is the opposite. It is, well, no, sorry, I lied. It is 3 who support that, Sasha, Elizabeth, and Michelle. And then the rest are X's.
No, I hope you don't mean me.
Not including you.
Not including me.
Yes. So
Okay.
you can verbalize yours.
I'm a no on that.
Okay.
And then on the East 60th Street facing lots, yes, if you think R10A is appropriate zoning. So that is 10 FAR, 12 with MIH, and a height limit on the lots facing the bridge.
So gonna wait for Elizabeth. Yeah, so it's Michelle and Elizabeth and Sasha are a yes on that, and then the rest are no's.
Okay. All right, so that is very helpful. Is there anything else or different that anybody wants to raise as it relates to these particular blocks.
Did you want to take a poll about the side street, the 61st Street?
First Street, great idea. Okay,
Oh,
so
but
let me
before
go
we
back
make
to
that
the map.
poll, before we make that poll, I just wanted to kind of introduce or reintroduce the idea we talked about before, which was that on some of these side streets, that an FAR of the 6s or even a 7.2 might be appropriate in order to achieve MIH goals for certain parcels. So just something to think about. And wondering if that is an option you would like to look at here for this portion of the block.
All right, so let's ask two questions. Let's remind ourselves of what the FAR is for an R8B.
It is 4.0, and with City of Yes, it will go to 4.8.
Okay. So, and the next thing up from that is really R8A, I believe.
Right, but that would be contextual, yes. That would be 6.02. And then it would be 7.2. With
MIH.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do an A-B choice. And it literally is an A-B choice. So R8B is a 4.0 FAR, bumps up to 4.8 with MIH.
And
And
City of Yes.
Right, well, it doesn't have MIH except unless it's the City of Yes passes.
Right.
And a height limit of somewhere between 105, 75 and 105. And an R8A gets you a little bit more FAR, 6 FAR going up to 7.2 with affordable. And I don't think I've got the height limit in this presentation, but we can look it up. We had it in the prior presentation. So sorry about that. Let me just look it up now. So R8A has a base height of 60 to 85.
And then so yeah,
It has a maximum height of about 125, which will go up a little bit under City of Yes.
That's right. Up to 145.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is the height of the existing commercial mid-block building.
There you go.
What are the chances?
Okay, so vote green if you support R8A, which is the higher FAR, 6, base of 6, going up to 7.2 with MIH and about 145 feet height limit. And vote red if you prefer R8B, which is a 4.0 FAR, 4.8 with MIH, which only happens under City of Yes. It otherwise does not have an inclusionary option, and a height limit of 75 to 105 feet. So green is R8A, red is R8B.
Just waiting on Elizabeth's vote. Yeah, so Elizabeth and Michelle are R8B, and the rest are R8A.
Tara Rose, are you R8A or R8B?
Under the circumstances, I think I'm R8A. Okay. Is there anything else we need to poll as it relates to this block?
I think we have our framework for this block. For now.
All right. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Our July meeting date is scheduled. We have this on the calendar. I think we are July 16, is that correct, Will?
That really sounds correct, but let me pull it up really quickly. Yes, July 16th, Tuesday.
Okay, so Tuesday, July 16. Our next topic area are the 3 East 70s blocks, 1484, 1485, 1487. To remind everybody where these are all about East 73rd and East 74th Street between York Avenue and the East River. I think that's correct. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, yes.
So everybody go start doing your walking tours and visit. I'll be there with my camera. Judy,
Move to adjourn.
is there a second? Thank you, Craig. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope I will see you all at Philharmonic in the Park tomorrow night. Good night, everyone.